After concluding his China visit, Russian President Vladimir Putin held no guns back. Putin reiterated that every country has the right to choose its own security guarantees, including Ukraine, but also stressed that this principle applies equally to Russia. Blaming Western powers for ignoring Russia's security concerns, Putin dismissed German Chancellor's remark, calling him a war criminal, saying Merz was attempting to deflect the West's responsibility for the quote-unquote tragedy in Ukraine. He said that if common sense prevails, then there is light in the end of the tunnel.
Back in 2022, we urged Ukrainian authorities to respect the choices of people living in southeastern Ukraine, withdraw their troops from there, and end the conflict immediately. I must say this proposal wasn't entirely rejected at first. However, after the insistent urging of our Western European colleagues, withdrew troops from Kiev, the situation changed rapidly. We were then told, almost verbatim, "Now we will fight until either you twist our heads off or we twist yours off." I don't recall if I've ever stated this publicly, but it sounded like that. Nevertheless, it seems to me that if common sense prevails, it will be possible to agree on acceptable terms for ending this conflict. What I think about this? I think this is an unsuccessful attempt to absolve himself. Well, not him personally, but his country and the collective West in general, of responsibility for the tragedy that is happening now in Ukraine. What I mean, let me remind you, I have already said many times, in 2014, ministers of 3 European countries came to Kiev and signed a document that, in essence, was an agreement between the current government, between President Yanukovych at the time and the opposition. And in accordance with this agreement, all controversial issues of a political nature were to be resolved within the constitutional framework by peaceful means, by legal means. And literally in 2 days or the next day, a coup d'etat occurred, bloody and cruel. None of these guarantors lifted a finger to return the situation to the legal framework.
Никто из этих гарантов пальцем не пошевелил, чтобы вернуть ситуацию в правовое поле.
Well, Putin added that he was ready to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy if such talks were well prepared, even suggesting a meeting in Moscow.
Кстати говоря,
by the way, Donald Trump asked me to hold such a meeting. I said this is possible. At the end of the day, if Zelenskyy is ready, let him come to Moscow, and such a meeting will take place.
Responded to U.S. President Donald Trump's claim of a conspiracy involving Russia, China, and North Korea, calling it, quote-unquote, a sense of humor.
Well, the U.S. president is not without humor. It's clear. We all know this well. I have a good relationship with him. We communicate with each other on a first-name basis. I can tell you, and I hope he will hear this too, as strange as it may seem, but during these 4 days of U.S.-Russia summit in Alaska, during the most diverse negotiations both informally and formally, no one has ever expressed any negative judgments about the current U.S. administration. That's the first thing. Second, without exception, all of my interlocutors, I want to emphasize, everyone supported our meeting in Anchorage. Everyone. And everyone expressed hope that the position of President Trump and the position of Russia and other participants in the negotiations will lead to the end of the armed conflict.
Позиция России, а других участников переговоров приведет к окончанию вооруженного конфликта. Пожалуйста.
On U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, Putin said he had accurately conveyed Russia's views to Washington during last month's Trump-Putin summit in Alaska.
Я абсолютно убежден, что господин Витков.
I am absolutely convinced that Mr. Witkoff, in his contacts with me and other members of the Russian leadership team, conveys the position of the American president himself and no one else. Our negotiations in Anchorage demonstrated this clearly. The context of our talks made evident that he reliably communicates the Russian position to President Trump. Likewise, It became entirely obvious to me during the Anchorage talks that he accurately and objectively communicates the stance American leadership to us.
Позицию американского руководства для меня стало абсолютно очевидным в ходе.
Putin described his talks in Beijing as quote-unquote positive and useful. He highlighted energy as a key focus, noting rising global demand, including in China.
There were shots broadcasted where you and Chairman Xi were discussing age, immortality, organ transplantation. Do you really think that people will be able to live for 150 and more at some point? I think the chairman spoke about it when we were walking to the parade. Oh, yes. Mr. Berlusconi was actively into this topic once. The modern means of health support and medicine, even some surgeries involving organ transplantation, allow the humanity to hope that the active lifespan will not be like today. It differs from country to country. But anyway, that the lifespan would increase considerably.